Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is respectable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is worthy of outstanding recognition, think about such things. Think about that. Over the course of the evolution of human society, of human civilization, there have been always two groups of people. There have been the weak and the strong. And for most of the tens of thousands of years of human evolution and human development, that strength was measured in terms of power, in terms of physical capacity. In the world, there were basically two types of people: the people that grew and got and produced the food, and the people who took the food from those who were producing and growing and getting the food. It was very Darwinian for a millennium. It was a Darwinian world where the survival of the fittest was the law of the jungle, and only the strong survived. But not only did just the strong survive, they decided who would survive. It was a dog eat dog, it was kill or be killed kind of world for all human beings. And this was true until 8:15 in the morning on August the 6th of 1945, because it was at that moment that the first atomic bomb was detonated over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. And in that moment, everything about the Darwinian process of human evolution changed. Now, make no mistake about it, it had been changing for quite some time. This development of the power of knowledge had been underway, and it would take an entire generation before we would see the transition from the economics of materialism, the economics of industry, changing to the economics of technology. We would leave the industrial age and enter into what we know of today as the postmodern New World Order of the information age. It is the display of the power of information, of the power of knowledge that changed everything. Now, it has changed many things for the better. We have been beneficiaries of a world that has become more knowledgeable, more informed, that understands more. We are wiser, we are smarter, we are healthier than generations before. In fact, in just one generation, the life expectancy among Americans has increased by over 20%. In 1945, the average life expectancy of an American man was just under 64 years. Women lived about an average of 5 years longer, just over 69 years. Today, in 2020, the average life expectancy for an American man is just above 76 years. And for women, it's just above 81 years. But if you are part of the generation that I am a part of, born after 1945, and you grew up in the tsunami of the development, the evolution of this information age, you are aware that this transition, this evolution has a cost. It has a price. And I have been counting that cost recently. I've been noticing what it cost us to be a part of this New World Order, to be a part of this information age. You see, when we live in a world where there is a tsunami of data and a tsunami of information, none of us can comprehend everything about the world and the universe that we live in. In fact, most of us, if we're paying attention, the more we know, the more we realize how little we know. So we rely on experts, we rely on scientists and physicians and mathematicians and professors and teachers and preachers to tell us what to think. We have to homogenize and synthesize and categorize and classify the information because none of us can take it all in. So we rely on others to tell us what to think about the world that we live in. And because of that, I'm afraid, we have forgotten how to think. And in our rush to accumulate a quantity of knowledge, we have lost track of what quality knowledge is. And I'm afraid that today, very few of us know the difference between things that are true and the truth. It's my prayer today. It's a simple prayer. It's a twofold prayer. It's a prayer that we would think about thinking. And in doing that, first of all, that we would understand the importance of the difference between knowing what to think and knowing how to think. And that we would realize there is a significant difference between what we know to be true and what is the truth. Now, to think about thinking, we're going to use a single verse, a single sentence from the Bible. Over the next few weeks, we're going to focus our thoughts. We're going to think about thinking by beginning at the end, by finishing at the starting line, by talking about square one, by talking about this one single sentence from the Apostle Paul's letter to the church in the city of Philippi. Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. And it begins, astonishingly enough, by saying, finally. Now, we know that this isn't the last thing in the letter. There's 15 verses that remain in the letter of what we have as the book of Philippians after verse 8. And the reality is that finally doesn't mean this is the end. It's kind of how we use finally when we want to summarize everything I've said before. If you haven't heard anything I've said up to this point, this is the thing you can't miss. This is the bottom line. This is the most important thing. Finally, pay attention to this, brothers and sisters. Brothers and sisters. It's actually just one word. It's the Greek word adelphoi. Adelphoi. And it is the most inclusive word in the Greek language because the word brother, and this is the word from which we get Philos Adelphia, the city of brotherly love. When you address someone as a brother or a sister, as an adelphoi, you create equality, you create inclusion, you create tolerance. Because to be a brother means there's not masters and slaves. There's not teachers and students. There's not bosses and employees. There's only us. All of us in the human collective of shared responsibility, of shared opportunity. The idea that what Paul is saying is I want us to understand we are on a level playing field when it comes to how we think. He then lists 7 ideas, 7 suggestions, 7 adjectives. Whatever is true, whatever is respectable, whatever is right, whatever is lovely, whatever is pure, whatever is admirable, if anything is worthy of outstanding consideration. And typically, most theologians, most Bible scholars, Bible teachers believe what Paul is doing here in this sentence in Philippians chapter 4 is he's telling us what to think. In fact, I couldn't find a single commentary that would talk about the importance of thinking itself. But I respectfully disagree with the common interpretation, and I don't think that we're being told what to think here. I think this is a guide for learning how to think. The word that's down here, think about these things, is the Greek word logizomai. Logizomai. And logizomai has a couple of nuances. Logizomai means to consider, to meditate, to contemplate, to think about things, to reflect on things. And if we want to remember how to think, if we want to sharpen our ability in how to think, we're guided in saying, focus and concentrate and meditate and consider these 7 things. But the word logizomai doesn't just mean to sort of sensory deprive yourself and focus on these ideas or these thoughts. It also means to scrutinize. It also means to examine carefully. It means to investigate and to interrogate. This is from the word, we get the word logic that comes from this word, what it means to think. It means to pull things apart. It means to examine, and it means to interrogate and investigate at depth. To constantly search out things. Living in a world that is an information age, living in the day that we live in, where the currency of power, the currency of influence is knowledge and information and data. It's difficult. It's perhaps impossible for any of us to really understand what the world is about, what is going on. And so in the synthesization, I think I made that word up, synthesizing of knowledge, in the homogenization of it, we do something that I call, we tribalize knowledge. We tribalize it and we institutionalize it. When we are people who are told what to think, rather than taught how to think, we have a tendency, we inevitably wind up institutionalizing or tribalizing our knowledge. There's a group of people that do this better than anyone, and it's the church. Religious people have the God card. Spiritual people have the secret knowledge. So you can't really figure this out unless I tell you what to believe, unless I tell you what to think. And throughout the course of the development of Western civilization, it was the church. It was the church that held the thoughts of humanity hostage. For almost 1,000 years. We call it the Dark Ages. It was when knowledge became institutionalized and those in authority said, this is what you think. They prohibited people from thinking for themselves. That is until October the 31st, 1517. There was a young German priest. His name was Martin Luther. And Martin Luther, he read and he wrote Hebrew and he wrote Greek and he wrote Latin and he wrote German. He was a brilliant academic. And at some point he realized, oh, wait a minute. I'm reading the same Bible that the church is, and I can't find where it says that priests can't get married. I'd really like to know where we came up with that. And as I read my Bible, as I think about these things, I really can't find where it says that we should worship Mary. And as I read my Bible, I don't know where it says that it's possible for you to give me money and I can absolve you from your sin. I don't find that in my Bible. And he began to think for himself, and on October 31st, 1517, he nailed these 95 thoughts to the largest church door in Europe at the cathedral in Wittenberg, Germany. And we know historically what the watershed of that moment was. It was the Protestant Reformation. It was the permission to think for yourself, permission to use the brain that God gave you. Not just knowing what to think, but knowing how. Now, obviously, there were others who had thought these same things. There were others who had these same ideas. You can't suppress the human mind to where people can't express themselves or think for themselves. But culturally, it turned over the soil and created the seedbed that just over 100 years later gave birth to what we call the Enlightenment. There are some scholars who believe that the Enlightenment began in 1637 with the publication of a book by a philosopher named René Descartes. It was called Discourse on Method. And part of the subtitle of Descartes' seminal work was Understanding or Finding Truth in Science. And it was the Enlightenment that was birthed out of the soil that had been tilled in the Protestant Revolution that gave us empiricism, that gave us the scientific method, that produced for us the permission as human beings to use the brains God gave us to think for ourselves. We are living 500 years downstream from the Reformation, 350 years or so downstream from the Enlightenment. And yet I'm afraid that what I'm seeing in our day is that we've forgotten how to swim. We've forgotten how to think for ourselves. Our knowledge has become tribalized. Our knowledge has become institutionalized. And I understand it, I get it, I realize that part of the problem is there's too much to know. So we have to defer to the experts and we have to defer to the voices in our culture that are our leaders and our guides, and we say, just tell us what to think. But we've forgotten how. We've forgotten the importance of each of us being able to think for ourselves. When the Apostle Paul was saying that these things, whatever is true, whatever is respectable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is worthy of outstanding recognition, he's telling us how to think. He's saying, this is how you think. You begin to dissect these things. You begin to examine these things. And we've forgotten how to do it. I think the evidence of it has become apparent over the last 6 months of American history. It's become apparent that we have tribalized our knowledge, that we have institutionalized our thinking, and we just mimic what we are told to think instead of thinking for ourselves. I mean, why is it? Why is it that we are arguing about a virus? Why are we doing that? Why are people so enraged by the opinions or by what they're told about the effects of this? It's because when your knowledge becomes institutionalized, you get angry when someone disagrees with you. Now, this isn't just a theory I have. This is solid psychological thought that the anger that we are seeing in our culture is based on the idea that we are believing things, we are thinking things we're not sure of. And so we gather together in homogeneous ideological tribes, and when someone thinks differently than us, we have these ad hominem responses where we criticize the integrity or the character of the person rather than we know how to engage thoughtfully in a conversation. A person who disagrees with you, if you know how to think, should not make you angry. But I don't think it's just anger. At the root of it, I think we're afraid. We're afraid. We're afraid of 3 little words, I don't know. Because of the great unknown, and we realize how much mystery there is in this universe, so we pick sides and we say, this is what I'm going to think. And don't you dare challenge that. I think if we know anything, it is God has fashioned us to be creative and to be intelligent and to be able to process ideas courageously and boldly. This is dangerous stuff. But I think we have found ourselves living in a world where we are under the tsunami of information, the nuclear bomb of knowledge. And we just want to be told what is it we're supposed to think. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't believe it is a coincidence that the first idea that we are to think about is what is true. Whatsoever is true. The Greek word for truth is the word aletheia. Aletheia. Aletheia does us no favors. The etymology of aletheia does us no favors because it's an ambiguous kind of idea. Truth in the Greek language is something that is substantial, something that is real, something that is reliable. But historically, it was a word that was kind of defined by Greek philosophy. The word truth was used as sort of the cornerstone of Greek philosophy by Aristotle and by Socrates and by Plato. In fact, it was Plato who understood the duality of aletheia. What that means, if you're familiar with Plato and his writings, Plato understood, and his famous metaphor is the cave. Plato understood that we experience the world around us, and we discern what is true by our observation, by our experience, by our evaluation of what is true. But Plato suggested that that's only what is true. It's just a shadow on the cave wall. What is truth, what is the truth, is the thing that casts the shadow. And the word aletheia has both of these meanings. It has the idea that it is both this subjective, experiential, changing, true thing that we experience, but it is also the truth, the immutable, unchanging, eternal, and infinite. It's interesting, in the story of Jesus that's recorded by the Apostle John, he uses the word aletheia and its cognates 53 times. And most of the time, it is used by Jesus, talking about what he wants his disciples to know. For example, in John chapter 8, he says, "You will know the truth, aletheia, and the aletheia will set you free." In John chapter 14, he makes this ridiculous statement where he says, "I am the way, the aletheia, and the life. No one knows the Father. No one can figure out anything unless you know the truth in me." In his final conversation before his execution with the Roman bureaucrat Pontius Pilate, Pilate the Fifth, Jesus basically says in John chapter 18, he says, "The reason I have come to the earth is to show people what the truth is. And if you are serious about discovering the truth, not just finding out what is true, but knowing the truth, you will listen to me." And then Pilate asks the right question. He asks exactly the right question. What is the truth? What is the truth? So how do we do it? In an information age where we cannot possibly absorb all of the knowledge and all of the truth, how can we think for ourselves? I think we do it by asking one simple question. Why? Why? 2 + 2 = 4. Why? The earth revolves around the sun. Why? This is what I am telling you is true. Why? To interrogate the things that we believe or are told are true is to seek the truth. It's what it means to think. It's how we think. We search for, we seek out, we interrogate, we investigate, we carefully examine by simply asking, why? Why? At some point, we all realize we come to a place where we realize you can't split the hair again. And you have to plant yourself and say, I believe that this is true. But we should be a people of constant, relentless interrogation. Always asking, why? Explain to me why. I don't remember if Diane and I made an intentional decision. I just remember it was part of our parenting ethic. From the time that our first daughter was born, over 35 years ago, we had committed to never say this to our children, because I said so. Now, as a parent, you realize that you got to shortcut a whole lot of conversations, because you cannot explain to your children why you are telling them no, or why you are instructing them, or why you are punishing them. But we committed from the very beginning to never say, because I said so. To always tell them why. Always tell them why. And it required a whole lot more energy on our part, but I believe it was because I wanted my daughters to grow up and know how to think for themselves. That one's bit me in the butt, I can tell you that. I mean, I have raised, my wife and I have raised 3 very intelligent, creative, strong-willed, independent-minded young women. But let me tell you this. I would not want to be a part of any family that wouldn't value that. Whether that's a biological family or a spiritual family. And I know the world and our country and our city is populated with churches, with hurting people who are coming in and they're saying, I need answers. Tell me what to think. Tell me what to believe. We will not be that place. We will be the place that invites you to use the brain God gave you to seek out not just what is true, but also what is the truth, and to think and know how to. There's a hilarious story. I think it's a hilarious story, and it's a story about a horse. It's a story about a horse that walks into a bar. See, it's funny already, isn't it? And the horse walks up to the bar, and the horse orders a drink and says, make it a double. And the horse downs the drink. Says, give me another. Downs that one. Give me another. Downs that one. And the bartender's pouring these strong doubles for the horse, drink after drink after drink. And finally, after quite some time, the bartender walks up to the horse, looks at the horse, and says, hey, do you think that you are an alcoholic? And the horse looks at the bartender and says, I don't think I am, and disappears. I think that's funny. And it's true. It's true that I think that's funny. But the truth is, most of you don't get it. Because the truth is, I didn't set up the joke. You see, for the joke to really be funny, I have to tell you that it's a joke about René Descartes. And cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. But I couldn't tell you that before I told you the joke, because that would have meant putting Descartes before the horse. See? The truth is, that's a great joke. It's a difference between what is true and what is the truth. It's my prayer today that we would understand the importance, the significance of that difference. That we would understand the significance of the difference between knowing what to think and knowing how to think. Think about that. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is respectable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is worthy of outstanding recognition, think about such things.